Just really quick, I wanted to remind y'all that the Games and Online Harassment Hotline is here for you, for your friends, and your colleagues. We provide emotional support to folks who make or play games, which is such a broad range of people. So, you might not need it today, but maybe you need it tomorrow. So we just want you to know about it. You can learn more at gameshotline.org.
There should be fucking riots in the streets. But instead of this old man, just smiling at his grandson in this museum, I wanted to set my couch on fire.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two dapper supervillains who always steal the show. Carolyn Pettit.
Hello.
And Ebony Adams.
What's up, people?
This week we'll be talking about the latest entry in Marvel's media takeover, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Why did they put those in front of everything? Whatever. Anyways, it's available now on Disney Plus and your local military recruitment booths around the country. Stick around for this delightful conversation. Hello, friends.
Hi.
Hello.
What's going on?
Anita, I would just like to ask you, what was it like being directed by Regina King for One Night in Miami?
My God. Oh my God. Can you, what? Okay, you need to explain the joke that you just made. But
yeah, so
fuck.
Listen, Daniel Kaluuya, who is just an amazing actor and who won an Oscar last night for his role as Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah, was asked by a journalist in one of those standing interviews, what was it like to be directed by Regina King? He had been mistaken for Leslie Odom Jr., who was in One Night in Miami. And if this doesn't just say everything about how interchangeable we are to Hollywood and the media, it's so ridiculous. And then I saw later that Yun Jung-yoon, who won for Best Supporting Actress for Minari, in her question session with this journalist, she was asked because she had a little moment with Brad Pitt. How does Brad Pitt smell? And, just these bullshit ass superficial questions. They do not care about us and about craft and what we bring to roles. They couldn't be less prepared or less, caring about us.
She replied,
so ridiculous.
Not to undermine your very important point, but she replied with, "I don't know, I'm not a dog."
Yeah, exactly.
Which, it was a great response.
Yeah.
For more on the Oscars 2021, check out our bonus episode.
Yes. Although I have to say, I didn't watch
please.
it. I do what I do with all award shows, which is I consume them via Twitter. And that seemed like a good decision on my part.
Yeah, I watched it. I think, Carolyn, you watched it too, which was surprising because you're not a big award show person.
Well,
neither am I, but
I mean, I go back and forth with the Oscars because I mean, it's the sort of thing where I like being part of the conversation. I mean, I care about film a lot, and my feelings about the Academy Awards are very complicated. I mean, we've done whole episodes about it where I think they matter because they define, I don't think they matter in and of themselves, but they matter because they define for so many people what cinematic excellence looks like, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I was just curious, it being a different year for the ceremony in terms of obviously COVID and everything impacting how the ceremony happened. So the vibe of the show was, well, and we'll get into this in the bonus. I was drawn to it probably for, because it's an off year and in terms of just how the ceremony was handled and I mean, a lot of the nominees are I have strong feelings about them, you could say. So,
yeah, perfect.
I'd be much more interested in an award show that was solely focused on the craft categories. Those are much more interesting to me at this point. So,
what isn't a craft category?
Well, the acting categories, the directing categories, even the writing categories, they're interesting, but I have no need to participate in the cultural conversation about them. Really, it's particularly year like 2020, when so much that came out, I just didn't have very strong feelings about. But I am really interested, and I tend to learn more when I read about the nominations for things like, sound design or sound mixing, like those kinds of things, just because I know so little about those crafts, and those below the line categories, that I'm always like, oh, word. Okay. So like this person was nominated for this and they've also done this, and I'm going to check those things out.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
well, just for folks who don't know, below the line is like mostly crew. It's just not the like actor and director. That's just very
and writer. Yeah.
Industry language. I just wanted to clarify because like every part of filmmaking is craft, and you're just specifically talking about like these particular parts that you're not as familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Like acting is a craft. That's all.
Yes.
I don't like that we like that it's about the celebrity of the actor as opposed to the performance of the actor. But we can get into that more in the bonus episode if we want to. I took rigorous notes about the Oscars
incredible.
for some reason.
Incredible.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. All right, so should we talk about today's episode
if you'd
and
like.
The topic for today?
Let's do it.
Excellent, Anita, because I have so much that I want to talk to you about, because I know that you are a huge fan
of
this series, and that you've been talking about on Twitter how much you loved about the messaging, the performances, the underlying structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let's get into it. Hot on the heels of the wildly successful WandaVision, Marvel fans were treated to a gift-wrapped American flag in the form of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a series that follows the post-snap lives of Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. Audiences will recall that at the end of the Avengers Endgame, Steve Rogers passed the mantle and vibranium shield of Captain America to the Falcon, his best black friend. His life partner, Bucky, the Winter Soldier, looked on in sexy approval, and all seemed right with the MCU. But as it happens, a humanitarian mess caused by geopolitical mismanagement and good old white supremacy stands in the way of the Falcon accepting his new full-time position as the Cap. Let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. I am glad that, we put this on the giant mega doc for upcoming topics. And then after we did, I was like, boy, I guess I might have to keep watching this show. I probably would have given up after the first episode. And this is coming from a woman whose family members are in the U.S. Air Force. So I was like, I don't need this. I can get this at home. This, U.S. Air Force commercial.
I mean, that's interesting because, like, for me, the first episode is when I loved the show the most, or when I liked the show the most. So, and I'll tell you why. Like, first of all, lots of Adipero Oduye of Pariah fame as Sam's sister. She is,
No way, that's who she is.
Yeah.
Anita, tell me you didn't just realize that today.
I did.
And
no
like,
wonder she's so delightful.
First of all, my God, she's beautiful. If I may say so. But also, like, she's just like her character and that relationship and like all the business around like the boat and like trying to get a loan and all this like kind of quote unquote real world grounded stuff, like, which, was when I found the characters and their lives and their relationships most interesting, right? And I mean, that speaks more to like my taste in drama, than anything else, right? I'm gonna, superhero, like global geopolitical drama, yawn, some black folks trying to get a loan and being turned down by the bank. Oh yeah, I'll watch that, navigating their brother-sister relationship and their history together and all that. Love that. So anyway, I was more on board with the show, I guess, in that initial episode.
I love that you were seduced by the, vague tendrils of it being a very Caro movie in the first episode.
I totally was.
You're like, what? Because you're absolutely right that the show carries the seeds of promise that it's going to tackle some really interesting issues, right? And the way that people talk about WandaVision, successfully or no, foregrounding really serious issues about like trauma and grief and, culpability when we hurt the people around us, right? So they the folks who created the Falcon and the Winter Soldier had the chance to really dig into some meaty stuff here. The issue of after Thanos snaps half of, humanity and, the universe out of existence, and then they come back. What does that mean for the people who have returned and the people who were there all along?
Look, if you want to if you want this story, just fucking watch The Leftovers. Like, don't bother with this fucking bullshit show is what I'm saying.
But if you don't want to watch The Leftovers, the fact that that the show sort of offers this tantalizing hint that we're going to really dig into this, and then ultimately becomes, yes, a recruitment poster, like a sop. The fact that everyone who offers even the mildest rebuke to the government, imperialism, like hyper violence, toxic mess, the fact that any character who offers the mildest rebuke to that ultimately is dismissed, vanquished, or whatever, and we end up with just like a new version of the same old is horrifying to me. And I mean, there were parts of this show that I liked, but as a whole, I was like, wow, you had all these great ingredients, and then you wound up just giving me, a shit sandwich again.
Marvel needs to stop with the fucking grief and loss trauma talk because they don't know how to do it. And it seems to be all they want to do because they think that they're being really deep and shit, and they're failing because they're forced into this like very status quo, appeal to everyone, don't like take chances kind of attitudes and feel like not attitudes, but structures. And it's just like WandaVision could have been dope, but it sucked. Like this could have been great, but it sucked. And I feel like that's just like what's coming out of the Marvel, churning. I don't know. Carolyn, what are my words?
I don't know, but I mean, I fully know. I fully know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But and for me, like the arc of the Winter Soldier is interesting. With regard to the show's handling of trauma, like and initially that was something too. Another aspect of the show where this series appealed to me, and I was sort of like, okay, I'm on board, or I want to see where this goes. And then ultimately, I was left disappointed. We get these great moments early on. I mean, James, Bucky, the Winter Soldier, whatever you want to call him, he's in therapy. He has this therapist who says things to him like, if you're alone, that is the coldest, most personal hell, and it's very hard to escape. And I was like, yeah, that's like, so there's like these sprinkles of truth and things that for me as somebody who is interested in stories about trauma, I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, you're not wrong. Like that's true. And there's a moment I love in episode 2 where we see John Walker, the new, Captain America, every conservative's, favorite Captain America, being on Good Morning America and literally on Good Morning America. And he presents this image of reliability and strength and responsibility. And we cut to Bucky, like sitting on the floor of his apartment, like looking like a total wreck. And I'm like, and that contrast to me is so interesting. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be hanging out with James over here. Like but then it has to, unfortunately, rather than being like just a kind of straightforward tale of healing and men healing together and like helping each other heal in ways that are healthy, we have to do all the same Marvel kind of bullshit stuff where men are like super guarded with each other, where like there's a point where Bucky says, he has this like heartfelt moment where he says like, maybe Steve was wrong about you if you threw that shield away, and if he was wrong about you, maybe he was wrong about me. And rather than it being this thing where like there's like actual talk about feelings and like growth and personal growth, Sam, he doesn't even acknowledge it in any real way. He basically says, look, I'm just going to push down my feelings and we can do this job and then go our separate ways. And like, ultimately we do get to a place where like they're friends and things are like healthier and everything. But the arc, the way we arrive there, to me feels so lacking in actual like, with one like moment that's an exception where they talk about what it meant, why Sam gave up the shield, before taking it back, and Bucky's like, I didn't think about that. Like, I couldn't have understood what it meant. I don't know. I just get so frustrated. And this is like a classic MCU relationship building. In the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Steve Rogers Cap and Bucky like have to have this like brutal punch fight with each other near the end before they can like be friends again. And I'm just like, like, I get that it's an action series, but like, can't we like dispense with this like faux male like defensiveness and like detachment from our emotions and like tough guy posturing and all that stupid shit at some point?
I just want to add to that too, because it's absolutely that, right? It's this toxic male friendships where men can't be emotional or vulnerable or whatever. And to go even further, it's like they have to actively be challenging each other, and they have to actively like pretend that they hate each other. And that's the jokes. Like the jokes are predicated on that type of toxic male friendship. It is something that like, it's in a lot of movies, but like it feels extremely prominent in like Hobbs and Shaw from the Fast and the Furious. Like that entire movie is predicated on the two of them having this kind of like, we got to work together, but we don't really like each other. So all the jokes sort of like are about how much they hate each other. It veers towards homophobia, which it did in this, but it's not a far stretch to that. And I think that, even something where you have the montage of them like fixing the boat together, which was probably one of the best parts of the fucking movie, is like, so obviously Bucky is stronger than Sam because of the serum. And so there's like this undermining of Sam's masculinity in a way that's like really subtle, but you see him like Sam's trying to like rip a piece off of the boat and Bucky just comes over and does it. And Sam makes this face and you're like, that was unnecessary, because literally you would have the person who is stronger do the strong work to make the time go by faster. Right. But it was supposed to be a gag. It's supposed to be a joke. And I think that, even when it does have these very tender moments, Carolyn, like you were saying, there's one near the end that is actually pretty fucking touching in episode 5. They undermined it completely by walking away from the conversation being like, well, we're not really friends, like we're not like really partners or whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck did you have to ruin it for? And it's because they have to reinforce the comedy, and their comedy is predicated on this toxicity.
I totally get what both of you are saying, but I have to admit that, like many people, I am subject to the charm of the chemistry between Sam and Bucky. That has spawned a million ships, right? Like a galaxy of fanfic, because there is something that personally I love about this kind of like it's charged their relationship with each other. I also do find it interesting, and no, we don't explore it sufficiently for my taste, but the idea that given their own choices, it's likely these two men would never have come together, never spent a moment in each other's company, but they were thrown together by forces outside of their control. And because they had a uniting element in Steve Rogers, right? It just reminds me of those friends that I have who are like friends of friends, and how when like the linchpin leaves, it's so awkward between the two of you. And you're just like, we have nothing to talk about and no way to relate to each other without that buffer between us. So yeah, I probably, gave the show more credit in that central relationship than I would if I, didn't respond. Like if that kind of relationship didn't resonate with me. But I of all the things that this show offers, the kind of like sniping back and forth between Sam and Bucky, it never progressed to a level at which I was troubled by it. So, but I totally get what both of you guys are saying. Yeah, absolutely. The idea that a man, can't just be like helpful to his male friend, or, share, a sad moment and then not try and undercut it with a joke. Yeah, it would be nice to see that and have it not be, a memorandum about, whether this dude is actually manly enough to, go kick foreign ass and make sure that the U.S. is never disrespected on the international stage.
Oh, boy. I think I had a slightly opposite experience of you, Carolyn, where I hated it from the beginning. Even despite those little moments that I don't disagree are interesting. I didn't even want to watch the show, so I'm definitely coming in with that attitude. But the Flag Smashers narrative destroyed this entire show for me, and like destroyed any goodwill I could possibly have. So all of the little pieces that I could point to that I'm like, this was nice and that was nice, and we're doing that. That's what this podcast is. Like, I didn't hate the entirety of it, but that particular narrative was so fucked up and awful that I just like, I cannot forgive this show. Like, I cannot give it a pass because it was just so deeply offensive.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I will. And I think that I don't want to take up too much space with. I mean, yes, I do. I want to take up all the space with this, but I do think that the issue of blackness needs to be like unpacked as well, because that's the other big piece of this that gets undermined as well in my opinion in the movie, show, whatever. So the Flag Smashers, the reason that I'm so frustrated is, and I've talked about this endlessly, like the framing of activists is in mainstream media is so regressive. Someone on Twitter sent this to me. It was from Pinball Witch, and they described the situation like this to a friend. Carly is what capitalism wants you to think anarchism looks like, and Falcon's sister's neighborhood is what actual anarchism looks like. And I thought that was a really lovely way of describing just how like deeply they got this wrong. So the thing is, the Flag Smashers, who's run by this woman, Carly, who's just fucking incredible. Like, she's so appealing to look at. Like, I don't mean to be an, okay, I'm the only one, but like those freckles in her face and everything, she's so fascinating.
I acknowledge that Adepero Oduye is, to me, stunningly. I mean,
I just thought I love both
on notice. All right,
we respond to beauty and aesthetics. I mean, we're human beings, right? Like,
no, y'all are both on notice, okay? And me and my husband, Pedro Pascal, will be talking to you later.
The actor who plays Carly, her name is something.
Erin Kellyman.
Yes, thank you. I loved the casting. I thought it really brought a lot to the role and who that character was, and then they fucking ruined it. But what was happening here with the Flag Smashers, which is an incredibly stupid fucking name, is that the people who are fighting for liberation, which like they're fighting for a very good cause, right? They're fighting to be taken to be not displaced, to be integrated into the world, to like not be forgotten, to be fed, to have resources, like things that activists are fighting for all over the world in real life. What they did is they took the head of this movement and made her so extreme so that they can frame this both sides are corrupted by power narrative. So they put the extremeness of Carly, the head of this activist movement, in tandem with the extremeness of John Walker, who becomes Captain America, who becomes incredibly unhinged with the power, both as being Captain America and when he takes the help me.
The serum?
Super serum?
Yes, when he takes the serum. And so like those are not equal. Right? Like, those are not equal things. Those are not people with the same amount of power in the world. Those are not people with the same goals. They're not the people with the same like positions, and they're not fighting for the same thing. So having the story frame them as equally corrupted by power is so infuriating.
But I mean, I would actually just push back and say, I don't think it's quite equal because, but I think almost maybe what it does is maybe even a little more insidious, or at least has its own issues because we do get a speech, because obviously we know that, Carly, of course, has to die. And like, there was a great, there have been comparisons made between Carly and Killmonger in Black Panther, right? Of like black radical, thinkers and actors are always framed as like just, too extreme and too dangerous and the deep issues with that. But then we do get that speech, right? The speech from Sam to the politicians after Carly's death to like say, hey, she had like obviously some good ideas, right? I mean, she, whatever. I mean, that like, which, you know, the series does not give that like benefit of the doubt really to John Walker, but you know, I think that framing of like, she just kind of went about it the wrong way, or she was like, drawing outside the lines in her pursuit for like these things that she wants, is in its own way like super, you know, like fucked up. Like it's all because what it does is it perpetuates the Marvel Cinematic Universe framing of, or, you know, system in which the heroes always ultimately reinforce the status quo. Like the heroic thing is to work within the system and to reinforce the status quo. And, you know, some people on the bad guys may have some good points, and maybe we kind of need to listen to them, but they will never be the people who want to disrupt the system and actually change things will never be the heroes.
I mean, and here's the thing is that you have fucking Sam come up as Captain America, who solves all the problems with a goddamn speech about centrism, right? About how like, hey, these people who like murdered some folks and that like, you know, we had to kill, you know, she had some good ideas, but like, you know, it's like, there's just a couple bad apples. So like, let's just fix the bad apples things, you politicians, smack on the wrist. Like it was the most bullshit ending. And the thing that makes me really mad and why I think we are having such difficulty having these conversations is that as a Black man, he is reinforcing imperialism. He is reinforcing the fucking system that's causing his own oppression. And so you have him saying this whole narrative about how like he's creating a centrist he's creating this centrist military attitude about how like, yeah, you know, if we just listened to them and did it the right way, right? Like then, like, Carolyn, what you're saying, like, then everything will be fine. They just went a little extreme and, you know, they killed some people and, like, got caught up in it. But, like, if we just talk to the politicians, then they'll give us what we want. Like, that's not the way this shit works. And how many people did they fucking murder?
I am less, I was less angered by Sam's embrace of the Captain America role at the end because I never expected anything else. I was much more like disturbed and actually offended by the way that Isaiah Bradley gets defanged at the end of the show.
Yes.
To suggest that that man, after all that he has suffered, visibly, you know, like the fact that, you know, there's a short conversation about whether Steve Rogers knew that this had happened, and we never turn back to, okay, did Steve know that this gone on? But the fact that this man is essentially like, you know, brought over to the side of no longer causing troubles, no longer, you know, like dismissing everything he has experienced because of a statue, because, you know, there's now an exhibit to him in the Captain America Museum. Like, if anything, I wanted Isaiah Bradley to take up the mantle of the Flag Smashers and be like, no, burn this shit all down. His anger was
for 30 years. I was screaming at my TV. I was like, you were tortured for 30 years and now you're like, oh, I get to be in a museum?
So that's the one that got to me. Because, I mean, like I said, Sam, I always knew, you know? It's the representation question, right?
Yeah, but
like,
just because you knew it was going to happen doesn't mean it's like the right, like that it doesn't
Well, no, it's not that it's right, but it means, what I'm saying is because I knew that it was going to happen, I was prepared for it to happen. You know, there was less intensity to my reaction to it because it's the question in a way about representation. Right? So there's never a question that Sam is going to remain the Falcon. What's wrong with just being the Falcon and doing your own thing or becoming something new, radically transforming what it means to be a superhero? No, he then has to recreate something, like step into a role that a white man has already created, has already filled. And I was just like, this is not the way forward, but I knew it was coming. So,
I mean, I think that a black man, a black Captain America could be radical. I think it could be if he used that mantle and that label to, you know, indict America for its, you know, its history of white supremacy and so on, like, and to you know, I think there's potential there, and I
hard disagree.
Okay.
Because he is existing within a system. He can scream all he wants in the system, but he can't change the system because he is a symbol of it. So like, yeah, so that's the whole point, is that you now have a black Captain America that's like, hey, politicians, you need to be better. But the thing is, having a black CEO of Exxon, or I'm just making shit up, but having a woman or a black person or a woman of color as the CEO of a corporation doesn't mean that it changes anything for how capitalism exists. It doesn't change anything for the oppression of like the United States government. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
You're still like, and that's the thing that I think is so frustrating, is that like we need to demand more from these representations that like burst out of the systems, that challenge the powers that exist, not just ask to be a part of the existing power structures that are oppressive.
Yeah. I mean, I want to go back to Isaiah Bradley for a moment, because I that whole sequence with the statue,
which didn't even look like him. I know that's not your point, but that made me so nuts.
First of all, speaking of things we like about the series, the actor who plays Isaiah Bradley is Carl Lumley, veteran actor, and who I'm just, oh my God, like I'm always so pleased to see him in things, and so just a little, seeing Carl Lumley on my screen, that in and of itself is like a plus for this series. But so the thing that I couldn't stop thinking, and maybe this is like a little, maybe I'm kind of going too far or whatever, or a leap too far with this, but like, so Sam says to him when they see the statue something like, nobody will forget what you've done for this country. But the thing is, Isaiah didn't choose. It wasn't service. Like the being imprisoned and being tested on for like 30 years or whatever. And what it made me think of, though, is how white America, how whiteness as a construct, and white people and white politicians, even though it was Sam saying that phrase, how we will often, view Black suffering as like inherently noble and like purposeful. And so it literally made me think of like Nancy Pelosi's comments after the George Floyd verdict and things like that. And so many like white liberal people on Twitter being like, yes, it was his life's purpose. Like it's Black people, like it's through Black suffering that we can be, move toward a more perfect union. Although also that like by treating the Black suffering that way, as if like that is what Black people are for, like inherently, actually diffuses it and kind of prevents us from actually acting on it in the ways that we need to, that white people and whiteness needs to, if we're ever going to move towards liberation. A few weeks ago, as my Freq Out, I talked about a book called Afro-Pessimism by Frank Wilderson. And one of the things he does in that book is lay out an argument, which is so I can't unpack here or go into the details of it, but that Black suffering to whiteness as a construct and as a force in the U.S. is far from like moving us toward like liberation, and like it actually is in a way like, because it's viewed in the way that it is, it's actually in a sense pleasurable to whiteness, and therefore like it is like Black suffering is an end unto itself, like and therefore. Anyway, I can't stop thinking about that book. So I just want to shout it out one more time. If you want like some radical Black thought, I highly recommend Afro-Pessimism. But anyway, yeah, like the whole Isaiah Bradley thing really was like, at this moment, I was like, no, come on.
Well, yeah, and speaking of this moment, I want to talk about, as you say, this was not something that Isaiah Bradley or his fellow soldiers chose for themselves. This was imposed from without. And it just reminded me, I think deliberately so, of the medical malpractice visited upon so many communities, but particularly Black communities in this country. One of the net results of which is, and yes, it is absolutely overstated because, the reason why a lot of Black folks are not getting the vaccine is because they don't know the vaccine is available in their neighborhoods. There's a whole host of like structural problems, right? But there absolutely is a distrust of the medical system and medical institutions in this country, largely based upon, the horrific abuses that Blacks have experienced in this country from the time of slavery. And so to have all of that completely swept under the rug, to have it be forgiven, to have Isaiah Bradley accept, because that is what the ending, scenes give us, as an Isaiah Bradley who has accepted with grace, what in generosity and forgiveness, what has happened to him was a slap in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, and no notion that like, okay, so if you put him in this museum, does that mean everyone now knows that he was tortured for 30 years? There should be fucking riots in the streets.
Exactly.
But instead of this old man, just smiling at his grandson, in this museum. I wanted to set my couch on fire.
Oh, boy.
Oh my gosh, I'm still so angry about what they did to my man, Carl Lumbly. So great. But can we go back to talking about John Walker? Because
that's exactly what I was going to ask you to do.
This was something that, like, I felt as if my brain was bending, because in so many ways I thought the show didn't know what to do with John Walker. And in fact, the show's embrace of existence as a transmission for traditional white supremacist and patriarchal values meant that perhaps one of the things they were trying to do with John Walker was subverted by just like the overwhelming weight of, the ideology that surrounds us. But when John Walker snaps, and his black best friend is fridged, and, that causes him to act out, and he brutally murders one of the flag smashers on TV. The idea that that this would have made a difference, to his acceptance in the halls of power. I was just like, there's no way, after the investment they have made in this dude, that they would have allowed him to, experience even the smallest bit of censure. It would have been hidden and covered up. But also, I was just like, you know what? Let's be honest here. This is the most honest version of a Captain America that could possibly exist. This is America, exercising its right and its power and its might over, countries, over communities that are less powerful than they, and, acting out on impulse. Taking, the moral high ground without any, sense of right and wrong, other than the power that enables them to do horrifically violent acts. There's something appealing about Steve Rogers as Captain America, right? And his sincerity, his eagerness to believe that a change is possible, his naivete in a lot of ways, the fact that he seems to be a man out of time. But there's something about John Walker where I was just like, this is the Captain America we deserve, and this is the one that we actually would have gotten.
I mean, I am, the character like John Walker is useful because he does allow the series to appear as if it has a working critique of American imperialism, right? Because John Walker is supposed to be like a zealot. He is supposed to be a character who takes American patriotism too far, and who we then look at and go, whoa, dude, that's fucked up. You are not you do not reflect the values of, that costume that you've you've modeled your costume on Captain America, but you are not worthy because you are a tyrant and, whatever. It does allow, and I do have complex feelings about, because I know that, and I feel weird. I know that there are people for whom seeing Sam take on the mantle of Captain America is meaningful. And right. And I respect that. I do, because, because symbolically, I can see why that could be, to have a Captain America movie, which apparently we are getting a Captain America movie, starring, with Sam as Captain America. It's, I always believe in the potential of this series to be better than it is, and to actually do something legitimately interesting. And I feel with John Walker in the mix, as a U.S. agent, which what a name that kind of speaks to that name, just it drips of American meddling in foreign affairs in ways that are inappropriate and imperialistic, and I feel you can do something interesting, but will you? will you actually do something interesting?
No, they will not. You know that.
Then I'll just be perpetually re-disappointed as I get my hopes up again that maybe this will be the time that they actually do something interesting.
Yeah. I know we don't have much time left, but can I just mention a couple of the things that I did like?
No, not yet. Hold on. I have one more thing to say.
Okay.
And then because I'd like to end on that positive. One thing that's just occurred to me is that in the U.S. right now, states are scrambling to pass laws against protests and against protesters, like to the degree that it will that like if you run over a protester with your car, you will not be responsible or held responsible for that injury or murder. Like it's really it. I don't think I've ever I don't use this analogy often, but it's like real 1984 shit happening, right? Like the squashing of dissent, the squashing of protest, which is already so limited, right? Because to protest, quote unquote, legally in America, you have to get a permit and you have to have the state accept your protest, right? And this is all in response to Black folks and allies coming out against police violence, and it being framed as riots, right? Which is not true. Most of the protests have been very peaceful and whatever, and it's the police that are causing the violence and the harm. But like that's another thing that pisses me off about this kind of framing is that like the flag smashers are theoretically who we should be aligned with.
Yes.
We should ideologically be aligned with them. And the fact that like we are living in a moment where we're more and more of our freedom of speech is of very specific people's freedom of speech is being reduced, right? That like this is another example of perpetuating that mythology that allows these things to get passed. Right. That like, well, and I know I'm drawing a very big parallel between real life and a fictional world, but like, it's not a far cry if you keep seeing activists on TV who are violent or who, murder and revelry and say things like your Black friend doesn't matter. Like his life didn't matter. Right. I think it's important that we like really demand better in terms of the way that we represent people who are fighting for liberation and justice, because this shit is not okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I just want to say before we end that, I'm happy Erin Kellyman got this job. Between this and her role as Enfys Nest and Solo. She consistently elevates these shows playing essentially the same role, which is just like a really compelling, rebellion figure. So I hope she continues to, get typecast in that way. Happy to see her every time. We didn't spend any time talking about Zemo,
which is so disappointing because he was so
right.
I was why do I like the creepy Nazi dude the most out of anything that's happening right now?
Well, this is interesting, right? Because, and again, we didn't get to talk about it, but hopefully we'll return to it, later, maybe in the bonus for a minute. But one of the things that is so interesting about this show is who is allowed to have a redemption arc, who the audience is encouraged to forgive, and who the audience is allowed to toss away. The fact that, it takes almost no time for us to get like friendly, fuzzy, hilarious dancing Zemo, and so it's like, the fan reaction to him is very telling when, we know what he did, but we're encouraged to forget it, whatever. But
it's the power of Daniel Bruhl.
Oh my God. And listen, I've gone on record as saying I don't trust that dude for some reason. And, I'm woman enough to admit it's because he's so good at playing these shitty characters that I fell for the okie doke, but whatever. The Dora Milaje, please put them in everything. Can we have a show about the Dora Milaje, please? I don't want anything else out of the MCU at this point. If you're going to give me a show, just give me the fucking Dora Milaje, please. But finally, the last thing. Y'all, this was supposed to be a joke. It was supposed to be a meme. It was supposed to be something we laugh at and kiki over. There is no official Black people's cookout. We need to stop inviting white people to the cookout and making it a joke. Bucky got a literal invite to the Black person cookout, and he couldn't have been happier at the end of this show. He was partying with those people next to that shrimp boat. He bought a grocery store cake. He was like, listen, I'm going to wind up dating one of the members of the Wilson family. It's going to be Sarah or it's going to be Sam, but one of y'all is coming home with me. Like, I laughed so hard at the ending of this show. I mean, just, I felt tricked in that I managed to retain some good feeling for it, but there were moments, I'm not going to lie, where I did smile. And, the ending with Sam and and Bucky having their happy times with that community cookout was one. And then Zemo dancing in that Eurotrash club was another. So, I got to give the show that.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back with some freakouts. Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you are, we would love you to support us to keep making it. If you become one of our patrons, not only are you going to do that and allow us to keep making this every week, but also you get access to some perks like bonus episodes, participate in polls to determine future episodes, access to our Discord server, which is only available to patrons, and, other things. If you love us, help support us. You can do that at patreon.com/femfreak. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. I am so excited because Ebony is bringing us a freak out. What you got, Ebony?
Okay, so a friend of mine had been recommending this show called The Great Pottery Throwdown for weeks. And I'm not someone who watches The Great British Bake Off, so I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And it's put out, I believe, by the same people. But I am so glad I took a chance on it. It was precisely what I needed to watch this weekend. So in the same vein of The Great British Bake Off, just, giving you this low stakes, really friendly, anxiety-free notion of like friendly competition between, passionate amateurs demonstrating how just amazingly talented they are, at this, some might say, niche hobby. The Great Pottery Throwdown brings together, I think it starts with 10 home potters. And each episode has them making one massive make, so one like big project, and then having like a couple of challenges. My heart is in my throat every episode. It is absolutely lovely. It is stunning to really sit there and watch people create something out of nothing. And, y'all know I hate to feel real human emotion, but I'm watching this show and I'm like, look at what humans have done. Like, some Neanderthal tripped over a pile of dirt and was like, let me add a little water. I'm gonna let it sit in the sun. And then the next thing you know, we got amazing pottery and ceramics. It's amazing to me. But the real appeal for me, and for a lot of folks who've watched this show, is one of the hosts who is this giant bear of a man who cries in nearly every episode at the beauty of the work that these potters have created, but also he is often just overcome with pride at people who have, overcome like their nervousness, their fear that they won't do well, maybe like a life issue that has prevented them from doing something. Y'all, listen, I have cried when this man starts crying. And it's so real. I cry with him every single time. It is purgative. It is cathartic. I encourage you to go get your emotion on. It's on HBO Max, The Great Pottery Throwdown. It is so good. So good. That's my freak out.
I love it. And I am a big fan of The Great British Bake Off, and it sounds like it's a very similar structure.
I think so. And, whatever. I'm probably never going to watch The Great British Bake Off because I just don't care. But The Great Pottery Throwdown was severely my jam.
Nice. Carolyn?
Yeah.
I think you have a freak out.
I do. Okay, so there is a Taiwanese game studio called Red Candle, and they make horror games. And their most recent game, called Devotion, was originally like released to great acclaim by the people who played it, but it was also pulled. It wound up being pulled from digital storefronts But Red Candle has now made it available on their own website. They've put up a marketplace on their own website, so you can't get it on Steam or Epic Game Store, but you can get it from Red Candle's own web store. And my God, this game is outstanding. This is a 3 or 4 hour horror experience, and it is first person game. It is set in an apartment in Taiwan, and you play as the father in this family. It's in the early to mid 80s, and so it's first person game, and you are moving around your family's apartment. Your character has a wife and a young daughter, and the first hour of this game scared me out of my skin. I was so terrified that I could not play. I had to stop playing because my nerves were so frayed, and I didn't come back to it for a month. And but not by cheap jump scares or anything like that. It's really elegant. It is so well done. It just, for whatever reason, probably because I'm alone in this apartment myself right now, and I'm particularly susceptible to horror effects. It just absolutely terrified me. But it's not just a horror for horror's sake. There is as you play through the game, you piece together what's going on with this family, and where the horror springs from. And it is so tragic, and it is so powerful. By the end of this game, I was crying. I was as deeply moved as I was as I had been frightened. And apparently it's, unsurprisingly, it's very, very rich and authentic with its cultural details and its authenticity. A friend of mine who has lived in that part of the world has commented on how much the apartment building just feels like places that he actually has been and stayed in when he was in that part of the world. But it's just as a story, as a horror experience, as a tale about a family. It's so rich. It's so thematically complex. It is so effective and powerful. I encourage people to buy the game and play it for themselves. It's not a hard game. There is no gameplay challenge per se. It's very, it's a game that anyone can play. Basically, it doesn't require gameplay skill. But it is it's outstanding, and I really hope that Red Candle has tremendous success with it, particularly after all the issues that this game had when it was originally released and then pulled from stores.
Wow.
That sounds so good.
Yeah, and I'm there's so much that I'm not saying because I want to avoid potential spoilers, but that I wish I could talk more about the things this game is doing and where the nature of the horror in this game and what it actually springs from, but I don't want to go into detail, but it is well worth it's as the plot develops and as you piece together what is happening and why this family has gone so rotten. It's kind of jaw-dropping. It's it's one of those it's meaningful. It's a meaningful, the best horror, right? The best horror speaks to something about how people actually live their lives or speaks to cultural atrocities or has some undercurrent of something real. The Devotion absolutely has that undercurrent of something real, and it is a powerhouse.
Wow. That sounds amazing. I also am so terrified of horror.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I can do that.
If you play it like during the day with the lights on and everything, it may not be that scary. And then you may be like, what was Caro even talking about? This game isn't. But I did play it like at night and it was dark in my apartment. And there were moments in this game where I was just like, oh, fuck me. Oh my God. I will never forget.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't with that shit.
Wow.
It sounds right up Ebony's alley, though.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna just add a quick little freak out. I wasn't going to, but then Carolyn insisted.
Yeah.
So I'm blaming you. I just finished a book called Making Movies by Sidney Lumet. And it's so fucking good. So Sidney Lumet is he's a director. He's directed like 500 bajillion quadrillion things and
across decades. His career spanned decades, right?
Yes. So he's done like film, television, theater, like won loads of awards, nominated for loads of awards, like just incredible. The films that you may have heard, I mean, you might be super familiar with him, but like 12 Angry Men, the original in 1957. What are some other ones? Serpico, Murder on the Orient Express, Network, The Wiz, Dog Day Afternoon.
A personal favorite of mine is Running on Empty. Not like maybe one of his biggest films, but a really beautiful family drama with an amazing performance by River Phoenix, among others.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Carol! For a second, I thought you were talking about Running Scared, and I was like,
No,
Sidney Lumet directed Running Scared, and that's one of your favorite movies. Yes,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But this book is the reason I wasn't gonna share it is because it's like the title is accurate. It's if you don't care about the specifics about how films get made, like you're not going to give a shit about this movie. But I think that even as people who do care about media, it's fascinating. So it literally every chapter breaks down a different component of filmmaking. So like how to choose a script or how directors choose scripts, how to work with actors, style, like how to choose a style, sound, editing, studio. He goes off about studios, which is really delightful. And the fact that he has had so much experience, it's this wealth of knowledge. And the thing that's really special about it is not only that he brings all of this experience, right? And he's like, in this movie, I made these choices and this shit went down in this movie. And it's not gossipy. It's just like, these are the reasons why this film didn't have a soundtrack or didn't have, a score and these ones did, or why it looks this way. It's just incredible. And he's such a lovely storyteller. He's got such a strong voice. And it's just, you kind of flow through it and just want to take in as much as you can. So if you have any interest in filmmaking, whether you want to get into it or you want to learn more about how films are made, I highly recommend this book.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's considered, it's considered invaluable. Like a lot of critics I know, who aren't interested in making movies themselves, but just as a way of as to how to aid their understanding and appreciation for film and for filmmaking, absolutely consider it an essential, one of the essential film books.
Yeah. I'm going to now go and binge his movies. I'm going to binge a bunch of movies, then I'm going to go back and read the book because I'm like, I want to know what he meant about that lighting choice. And I want to know about the sound thing here and stuff. And it's just, I loved it. So
awesome.
If you enjoy it, let me know. I'd be curious. And hey, if you have a freak out, you can submit it at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Next time, we'll be chatting about the new HBO Max series, Made for Love. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon. And our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.